My graduation's on Saturday. Hope you can make it. My brother replied, we'll be at a beach resort, maybe next time. My mom added, don't make this about you. I simply wrote, understood. What they saw on the news that night made the ocean the last thing on their minds. This happened about 8 months ago, and I'm still processing it all. Sorry for the wall of text, but I need to get this off my chest because what happened still keeps me up at night. Not from guilt, but from pure satisfaction. I, 24 female, need you to understand the type of people I'm dealing with here. My dad, Rick, works construction when he feels like it, which isn't often. He's got an excuse for every failed job. Unfair boss, bad weather, hostile coworkers. Reality is, he's lazy and unreliable. My mom, Sandra, has never held a job longer than 6 months. She's too busy playing victim on Facebook and blowing money on essential oils and lottery tickets. Every time she gets fired, it's because her boss was threatened by her potential or coworkers were jealous. Never her fault, obviously. My older brother Daniel is 26 and basically a carbon copy of our parents. All talk, no action, always looking for the easy way out. He's been between opportunities for 2 years, living in Sandra's basement playing video games while she makes excuses for him. The favoritism started early. When I was 8 and Daniel was 10, we both broke windows playing baseball. I got grounded for 2 weeks and paid for my window with allowance money. Daniel got taken to McDonald's because accidents happen, and at least he's active. When I got straight A's at 12, Sandra glanced and said, "That's nice, honey." Then spent 20 minutes gushing over Daniel's C++ in PE because he's really improving. They'd rewrite history constantly. Sandra would brag about Daniel being so athletic and popular while I was the quiet one, or kind of a loner. Never mind that Daniel got kicked off baseball for skipping practice, or that his friends just came over for free food and internet. The double standards were incredible. Daniel could crash Dad's truck while texting and get a newer one with a "boys will be boys" shrug. When I asked for help with college application fees, Sandra told me to stop being so entitled. Daniel could come home at 3 a.m., making noise, leaving messes, eating everything. Just Daniel being Daniel. If I left one dish in the sink, I'd get lectures about responsibility. But here's the thing, I actually did something about it. I put myself through engineering school, working nights at a warehouse, and weekends doing computer repair for elderly folks. 4 years of 3-hour sleep nights, eating nothing but protein bars and instant coffee, watching classmates party while I moved boxes or explained to 75-year-olds why their computer had 47 viruses. The warehouse job was brutal. Night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. with a supervisor who seemed personally offended by college students. I'd drag myself to morning classes, fighting to stay awake during fluid dynamics lectures. The computer work paid better, but was unpredictable. Late-night calls for broken computers that just needed to be plugged in. But I needed every dollar for my $850 a month studio in a neighborhood where sirens were the nightly soundtrack. My family found this hilarious. Daniel constantly made college girl jokes, doing impressions of me studying with a nerdy voice. Sandra would laugh, telling relatives I was putting on airs and thinking I'm better than everyone. She'd post passive-aggressive Facebook updates about some people thinking education makes them special. Rick ignored me unless he needed tech support, then became my best friend until his laptop was fixed. The moment I'd finished helping, back to pretending I didn't exist. But graduating engineering school isn't something you just do. Less than 60% make it through. The coursework is brutal. Professor Martinez's advanced calculus midterms left students crying in hallways. My structural analysis professor assigned 6 to 8 hour homework problems due every other day. One semester with 18 credit hours, 35 warehouse hours, plus extra computer jobs. I survived on 4 hours of sleep and energy drinks. Lost 15 pesos from stress. I'd sit in the warehouse parking lot wondering if I was insane, maintaining a 3.7 GPA while working 50-plus hours weekly. Every achievement got minimized. Dean's List? That's nice. Followed by gushing about Daniel's promotion to shift leader at fast food. Advanced engineering program acceptance? Rick's only comment. Hope you know what you're doing with all that debt. Rich coming from someone who bought Daniel a $15,000 truck while he already owed on another car loan. Apparently, my student loans were irresponsible, but Daniel's multiple car payments were just helping him get established. I wasn't just complaining about being the unfavorite, I was building something real while they celebrated mediocrity. 3 weeks before graduation, I sent a message to our family group chat. Graduation ceremony is May 15th at 2 p.m. at the university stadium. Would mean a lot if you guys could make it. I'd been thinking about this text for weeks. How do you ask your family to show up for the biggest day of your life when you already know they probably won't? I must have typed and deleted that message 20 times, trying to find the right balance between hopeful and not too needy. I'd already mailed them official invitations 2 months earlier, the fancy ones with the gold seal and everything. I'd written personal notes on each one, explaining what the day meant to me and how much their presence would mean. The invitations probably cost me $50 I couldn't afford, but I thought the gesture might show them how serious this was to me. Nobody had responded to those, not even an okay or we'll see, just complete silence, like I'd mailed them grocery store flyers instead of invitations to the biggest achievement of my life. I figured this text was my last shot at getting them to show up. Maybe the formal invitations had gotten lost in the mail, or they'd forgotten the date, or they just needed a gentle reminder. The response came faster than I expected, and it wasn't what I wanted to hear. Daniel wrote back, "Sis, we're going to be in Atlantic City that weekend. Casinos calling my name." The casualness of it hit me like a punch in the gut. No sorry or wish we could be there or even congratulations. Just a cheerful announcement about their gambling trip, complete with emoji like he was telling me about a fun movie he was planning to watch. Before I could even process that, Sandra chimed in. "Don't expect us to cancel our plans just because you want attention. Stop being so dramatic, Lisa." That word, dramatic, was like a trigger for me. That's what she'd called me my whole life. Whenever I wanted recognition for anything, when I cried after they missed my middle school graduation, I was being dramatic. When I got upset about them not coming to my high school award ceremony, I was being dramatic. Apparently, wanting your family to celebrate your achievements was just me being dramatic again. Then Rick, who usually never replies to anything, "Your brother deserves this trip. He's been stressed lately." Stressed from what exactly? Daniel's biggest daily challenge was deciding which video game to play. His most recent stress had been about whether to order pizza or Chinese food for dinner, but apparently he deserved a vacation while I was working 2 jobs to pay for school. I stared at my phone screen for probably 5 minutes, reading those messages over and over. Part of me wanted to blow up at them, to tell them exactly what I thought about their priorities. Part of me wanted to remind them that I was the first person in our family's history to graduate from college, that this was actually a big deal, that I'd been working toward this for 4 years. Here is the continuation of the rewritten script with Lisa as the female protagonist. Part of me wanted to beg them to reconsider. I could picture myself typing out a long message about how much this meant to me, how I'd been dreaming of this day since I started school, how I just wanted them to be proud of me for once. But I already knew how that would go. More comments about me being dramatic and needy. Instead, I just typed, "Got it." That was it. 2 words. No big argument, no emotional plea, no guilt trip. Just acknowledgement that I finally understood where I ranked in their list of priorities. But those 2 words took everything I had. I must have typed and deleted a dozen different responses before settling on something that wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing how much they'd hurt me. The thing that really got to me wasn't even that they were skipping my graduation. It was that they'd rather spend money they didn't have on Daniel's gambling habit than celebrate the biggest achievement of my life. Sandra had been posting about this Atlantic City trip for weeks. Much needed family time. Daniel deserves to have fun. Sometimes you have to treat yourself. The Facebook posts were the worst part. She'd share articles about supporting your children's dreams and post inspirational quotes about family, then turn around and dismiss my actual achievements. She'd posted a meme just the week before about how a mother's love knows no bounds, while literally planning to skip her daughter's college graduation. Treat yourself. With what money? Rick hadn't worked a full week in months. Sandra was unemployed as usual, and Daniel was living off whatever he could, guilt out of them. But somehow they had cash for Atlantic City hotels and casino chips. I did the math later. A weekend in Atlantic City, hotel, food, gambling money. They were probably looking at $1,500 minimum. That was more than I made in a month at the warehouse. Money they claimed not to have when I asked for help with anything school-related. When I'd asked for help with my graduation cap and gown rental, $150, Sandra had told me that money doesn't grow on trees and I needed to learn to budget better. But apparently $1,500 for Daniel's casino trip was just good family fun. The loneliness of achievement. The weeks leading up to graduation were weird. I kept my head down, worked my shifts, and tried not to think about walking across that stage alone. My engineering cohort was tight-knit. We'd been through academic hell together, but most had families coming from out of state, booking hotels months in advance. My study partner, Rachel, was stressed about having enough graduation tickets for her entire extended family. My friend Marcus had relatives flying in from Puerto Rico. The guy from thermodynamics was worried about restaurant reservations for his family's fancy celebration dinner. I had my neighbor. This sweet elderly lady had basically adopted me after discovering I was putting myself through school. It started when I helped her carry groceries upstairs. She noticed how exhausted I looked and started asking about my schedule. When she learned about my night shifts and day classes, she began bringing leftovers. "You too skinny," she'd say, handing me containers of homemade soup. "College girls need to eat good food." She'd ask about grades, classes, career plans. She understood maybe half of what I told her about engineering, but she'd nod and ask follow-up questions like she was genuinely interested. When I showed her my dean's list certificate, she insisted on making photocopies to send to her sister. When I mentioned my family couldn't make graduation, she looked genuinely upset. Family should be there for big day. This very important. You work so hard. Then she brightened. "I come cheer for you. Someone needs to cheer for Lisa. I be very loud." It meant everything, but also highlighted how alone I really was. Here I was, about to become the first college graduate in family history, and the only person who cared enough to show up was someone I'd known for less than 2 years. Thursday before graduation, while doing computer work for a regular client, I got a call from Sandra. Unusual. She only called when she wanted something. "Lisa, I need your help," she said without hello. Classic Sandra. No pleasantries. Straight to demands. "I'm trying to book this Atlantic City hotel, but the website's confusing. Can you put it on your card and I'll pay you back?" I couldn't believe it. She wanted me to pay for their hotel for the trip they were taking instead of coming to my graduation. The audacity was breathtaking. Not only were they choosing Daniel's gambling over my graduation, they wanted me to fund it. I don't have that kind of money, Sandra. "Don't be like that. It's only $400 for 2 nights. You have that job money saved up." My job money, like it was some luxury fund instead of survival money. That $400 was half my rent, 2 weeks of groceries, the buffer between making rent and choosing between electricity and food. I can't do it. "Fine, be selfish then, but don't come crying to us when you need help. Family is supposed to help family, but I guess you forgot that." She hung up. I sat there feeling this mix of anger and sadness. They wanted me to fund the trip they were taking to avoid me. The symbolism was almost too perfect. They literally wanted me to pay for them to avoid celebrating my achievement. Graduation day was absolutely beautiful. Clear skies, perfect 75 degrees, the kind of day that makes you feel like good things are possible. The stadium was packed with families, balloons everywhere, that electric feeling of celebration in the air. I found my place with the other engineering graduates, all wearing our special colored cords. We'd made it through one of the toughest programs, survived Professor Martinez's calculus, Dr. Kim's brutal physics, and the senior design project that consumed our final semester. My neighbor showed up in her best dress with a handmade sign, "Congratulations, Lisa," in glittery letters. She'd brought her teenage grandson to help navigate the crowd and take pictures. "I'm so proud of you," she said, tears in her eyes. "You worked so hard for this day." She gave me this tight hug that reminded me what it felt like to have someone actually care about your achievements. Her grandson, probably embarrassed, managed to smile and say, "Congratulations, that's really cool." The ceremony was long. Over 300 graduates, speeches from deans about entering the real world, but there was something magical about being surrounded by people who'd worked just as hard, who understood what getting through this program meant. When they called engineering graduates, we all stood together. I could hear my neighbor's voice cutting through everything. "That's my Lisa, engineering student." When they called my name and I walked across that stage, the feeling was indescribable. 4 years of exhaustion, stress, financial worry, family disappointment, it all led to this moment. I shook hands with the dean, accepted my diploma cover, and heard my neighbor screaming louder than families 5 times the size. "That's my Lisa! She works so hard! Engineering!" she yelled, and half the stadium turned to look. It was embarrassing and perfect. The photographer captured it perfectly. Me in cap and gown, genuine smile, holding my diploma with my neighbor visible in the background, cheering like a maniac. That photo sits framed on my desk at work. After the ceremony, she insisted on taking me and my engineering buddies to lunch at her favorite place. She was so excited, introducing me to the waitress as my Lisa the engineer, and ordering way too much food because celebration must have good food. We spent 3 hours sharing war stories about the worst professors and hardest exams. For the first time in 4 years, I could actually relax and enjoy what I'd accomplished. My neighbor kept asking questions, understanding maybe 20% of the technical details, but loving seeing us happy. But around 6 p.m., my phone started going crazy. Call after call from Sandra, Daniel, and Rick. Text messages flooding in. "Call me right now. Where are you? Answer your phone. This is urgent. Lisa, pick up. We need you. Emergency." I ignored them initially. They'd made their choice about priorities. This was my day, and I wasn't letting them ruin it with whatever drama they'd created. But the messages kept coming, getting more frantic. My phone buzzed constantly, disrupting the celebration. Finally, my neighbor noticed. "Lisa, maybe family emergency. You should check. Sometimes emergency, really emergency." Against my better judgment, I stepped outside and called Sandra back. She answered on the first ring, screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Lisa, where the heck have you been? We've been calling for hours." "I was at my graduation dinner. What's going on?" I asked. "What's going on? What's going on? We're sitting in a police station in Atlantic City because they're saying we used a stolen credit card and I don't know what's happening and you need to help us figure this out." My blood went cold. Even through her panic and the bad phone connection, I could hear the seriousness in her voice. This wasn't Sandra being dramatic about some minor inconvenience. This was real fear. "What are you talking about?" "They arrested Daniel at the casino, and now they're saying the hotel was paid for with fraud, and we don't know what to do, and you need to come down here or send money for a lawyer or something." I could hear Daniel in the background yelling about how this was all a misunderstanding. Rick was arguing with someone, demanding to know his rights. There were other voices, too. Official-sounding people asking questions, phones ringing, that background noise you hear in police stations on TV shows. "I don't understand how this involves me." "Because they're saying it was your credit card that was used for the hotel." The world stopped. "My credit card? The one I told you I couldn't use to pay for your trip just a week earlier? The one you got angry at me for refusing to hand over? Sandra, tell me you didn't use my card information." Silence on the other end for about 5 seconds. In the background, I could hear a police officer asking someone to please sit down and wait for their turn. Then, in a much smaller voice than before, "It's not what you think. Did you use my credit card without permission? We were going to pay you back. Daniel was sure he was going to win big at the poker tables, and then we'd give you all the money back, plus extra for the trouble. It wasn't supposed to be like this." The audacity was staggering. They'd taken my card information, probably from old mail or documents I'd left behind during visits, and used it to fund their gambling trip. They'd literally stolen from me to pay for the vacation they were taking instead of attending my graduation. "You stole from me to pay for your trip." "Don't be so dramatic. Families borrow from each other all the time. We were going to pay you back as soon as Daniel hit it big." Daniel hit it big. They'd gambled with my financial future based on Daniel's poker skills. Daniel, who'd never held a steady job for more than 6 months. Daniel, who thought he was a gambling genius because he'd won $50 on scratch-off tickets once. I hung up immediately and called my bank. The automated system put me on hold for what felt like an eternity. While I waited, I tried to process what had just happened. My own family had committed credit card fraud using my information on my graduation day. While I was celebrating the biggest achievement of my life, they were being arrested for stealing from me. Finally, I got through to the fraud department. "Yes, ma'am. We show several unauthorized charges on your account over the past 3 days. Hotel bookings, restaurant charges, and casino cash advances totaling $3,400. I had to ask him to repeat it because I was sure I'd heard wrong. $3,400 in unauthorized charges. "Ma'am, we've already flagged the account for suspicious activity and frozen it pending investigation." That was more than 4 months of rent. Money I needed for starting my career, for moving to a better apartment, for finally getting my life on track after graduation. Money I'd saved by working nights and weekends while going to school full-time, skipping meals and social events, and anything that costs money. They hadn't just skipped my graduation. They'd stolen my future to fund Daniel's gambling addiction. I walked back into the restaurant in a daze. My neighbor took one look at my face and knew something was seriously wrong. "Lisa, what happened? You look sick." I sat down heavily in my chair. My engineering buddies stopped mid-conversation and stared at me. "My family just got arrested for using my credit card without permission to pay for their Atlantic City trip." The table went quiet. Steve was the first to speak. "Dude, sorry, Lisa, are you serious?" I nodded, still trying to process it myself. They stole $3,400 from me while I was graduating, while they were supposed to be here celebrating with me. Rachel looked stunned. "Your own family?" My neighbor, despite her limited English, understood enough. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry, Lisa. You deserve better family than this." The next few days were a whirlwind of police reports, bank fraud claims, and legal consultations. My account was frozen pending investigation, leaving me with $60 in cash and a credit card I was afraid to use. The bank investigator was thorough and professional. She walked me through every charge, documented my relationship to the thieves, and reviewed the evidence. The hotel had clear security footage of Sandra using my card at check-in. The casino had surveillance video of Daniel withdrawing cash advances, bragging to other players about his system. "This is a clear case of identity theft and fraud," the investigator told me. "Since it crosses state lines and involves multiple institutions, we'll be working with federal authorities." Federal authorities. My family hadn't just committed a crime. They'd committed a federal crime. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Sometimes it's exactly the launch pad you need. Monday after graduation, I got a call from Brennan Engineering, one of the biggest firms in the state. They wanted to interview me for a junior project manager position. Starting salary, $78,000 a year. More money than I'd ever imagined. More than my parents had ever made combined. I showed up Wednesday in my only good suit and absolutely nailed it. The interview panel asked technical questions about structural analysis and project management scenarios, but what really impressed them was my work experience. 4 years of working 2 jobs while maintaining a 3.7 GPA had given me a work ethic most recent graduates couldn't match. Most new graduates talk about theoretical knowledge. The department manager told me, "You talk about practical application. That's rare and valuable." They offered me the position Friday with a $5,000 signing bonus and full benefits starting Monday. I walked out floating. After years of financial stress and family drama, I finally had real stability. While my family dealt with legal troubles in Atlantic City, I was apartment hunting in the nice part of town for the first time in my life. The investigation moved quickly. Since the charges crossed state lines and involved organized fraud, they'd planned this trip for weeks knowing they'd used my card. The FBI got involved. The evidence was overwhelming: hotel receipts, casino surveillance, even text messages between Sandra and Daniel discussing their plan to pay me back with winnings. They weren't just criminals. They were stupid criminals who'd left a paper trail a mile wide. Local news picked up the story within a week. Local family arrested in multi-state credit card fraud scheme. The headline featured 3 mugshots: Sandra looking defiant and angry, Daniel confused and scared, Rick like he'd aged 10 years overnight. The article detailed how a local family used a stolen credit card belonging to a recent college graduate to fund their gambling vacation. It didn't mention names, but in a town of 50,000 people, word spread quickly. By the time they made it back from Atlantic City, Daniel released on bail, Sandra and Rick facing charges, I'd started my new job, moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with actual parking and a dishwasher, and begun the most satisfying chapter of my life. 3 months after graduation, the legal case was reaching its conclusion. The evidence was overwhelming: hotel receipts, casino surveillance footage, bank records, even text messages where Daniel bragged about hitting it big with Lisa's money. The prosecutor offered plea deals to avoid a lengthy trial. Daniel's lawyer advised him to take it. 18 months in state prison plus full restitution was better than the 3 to 5 years he was facing if convicted on all charges. Sandra's deal was even better: 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and a $10,000 fine, plus restitution. Rick avoided criminal charges but was named in the civil restitution case since he'd benefited from the fraudulent trip. The financial judgment alone was crushing. They owed me the $3,400 plus interest, legal fees, and punitive damages. The total came to just over $12,000. For people who could barely scrape together rent money, it might as well have been $12 million. But the social consequences were almost worse than the legal ones. Our hometown isn't huge, maybe 50,000 people, and news travels fast. The local newspaper covered the sentencing, complete with photos and details about the family who'd stolen from their daughter and sister on her graduation day. Everyone knew about the arrests, the trial, and the family drama. Sandra couldn't go to the grocery store without people whispering and pointing. Rick lost his regular crew and couldn't find steady work anywhere in the county. His reputation in the construction community was completely destroyed. Daniel's incarceration became something of a local legend, the story of the guy who went to prison for stealing his sister's money to gamble, while that same sister was graduating from engineering school, was the kind of cautionary tale people told to illustrate bad decision-making. Meanwhile, I was being profiled in engineering magazines as an inspirational success story. The local newspaper that had covered my family's arrest also did a feature story on young professionals making a difference in the community. There was my photo on the front page of the business section, standing in front of a bridge project I'd helped design. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. While they were dealing with court dates and social humiliation, I was getting promoted at work and building a national reputation in my field. My second promotion came just 8 months after starting, senior project manager, $95,000 salary, company car allowance. I was 24 years old and making more money than most people in our town made after decades in their careers. The local newspaper article mentioned my engineering degree, my rapid career advancement, and my upcoming speaking engagement at the state engineering conference. It also mentioned almost in passing that I was the daughter of local residents recently convicted of credit card fraud, which was probably the most polite way possible to reference the family scandal. I know my family saw the article because Sandra's sister called to congratulate me. She mentioned that Sandra had been really struggling since seeing the article and knowing how well I was doing. The first plea for help came about 4 months after the sentencing in the form of a handwritten letter from Sandra. Their internet service had been shut off for non-payment, so she couldn't email or use social media to contact me. The letter was written on notebook paper in her sloppy handwriting, complete with cross-outs and spelling mistakes. Lisa, I know we made terrible mistakes, and there's no excuse for what we did, but we're family, and family is supposed to forgive each other and help each other through hard times. Daniel is in jail, and it's killing me every day knowing my baby is locked up with criminals. Rick can't find steady work because everyone thinks we're criminals too. I can't afford my blood pressure medication, and we're 2 months behind on rent, and I don't know what we're going to do. You're doing so well now, and we see your picture in the paper, and we're so proud of you, even though we never got to tell you that properly. I know we messed up your graduation, and I know we hurt you, but we're desperate now. Can you please find it in your heart to help us? We'll pay you back as soon as we get back on our feet, I promise, on my mother's grave. You're the only one in the family who made it, and we need you. Your mother who loves you, Sandra. P.S. Can you also help with Daniel's commissary account? He says the food is terrible, and he needs money for soap and things. I read it twice, noting the manipulation techniques she was using, playing the victim, invoking family obligation, promising to pay me back, even asking for extra money for Daniel's comfort in prison. Then I put it in my desk drawer without responding. 2 weeks later, Daniel called from county jail. Collect calls from inmates show up with a special recording, so I knew exactly what it was before I answered, but I was curious to hear what he had to say for himself. Lisa, sis, thank God you answered. I know I messed up bad, like really bad, but I'm about to lose everything here. Emma's completely done with me. Mom and Dad are about to get evicted, and I'm looking at real prison time when this gets transferred to state. You're the only one in the family who made something of herself. Can you help us out with a lawyer? Like a real lawyer, not this public defender who doesn't care, or maybe just help Mom and Dad with rent so they don't end up on the street. His voice was shaky, desperate in a way I'd never heard before. Prison was clearly not agreeing with Daniel's previous lifestyle of video games and Mom's cooking. I swear on everything. I'll make it up to you when I get out. I'll get a real job. I'll pay you back with interest. Whatever you want. Just please don't let our family fall apart because of my stupid mistake." For just a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. He sounded genuinely remorseful, more mature than I'd ever heard him. Then I remembered my frozen bank account. My graduation day spent explaining to fraud investigators why my own family had stolen from me. I hung up without saying a word. Rick tried a different approach. He showed up at my office building on a Tuesday afternoon looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. He'd lost weight, his clothes were wrinkled, and he had that defeated look of a man whose pride had been completely broken. The security guard in the lobby called up to ask if I wanted to see him. "Tell him I'm in a meeting," I said. But I watched from my office window as he stood in the parking lot for over an hour, probably hoping to catch me leaving. He looked older, beaten down in a way that almost made me feel bad. Almost. But then I remembered all the times he'd ignored my achievements, all the family events where Daniel was celebrated while I was dismissed, all the occasions where he'd chosen to support Daniel's laziness over my hard work. When I finally left the building through a side exit 2 hours later, he was gone. Here is the continuation of the rewritten script with Lisa as the female protagonist. The most pathetic attempt came 6 weeks later. Sandra had somehow managed to create a GoFundMe page titled "Help a Family Destroyed by False Accusations." The description was a masterpiece of victimhood and manipulation. Our family has been torn apart by a terrible misunderstanding that has been blown completely out of proportion. My son Daniel made a mistake trying to help our family during a difficult time, but now he's in prison and we're facing homelessness because of false accusations and media attention that has destroyed our reputation in the community. We are good people who made one error in judgment, and now we're being punished far beyond what we deserve. My daughter Lisa has done very well for herself, but has turned her back on her family in our darkest hour. We just need help getting back on our feet and clearing our name so we can rebuild our lives. Any donation would be appreciated as we struggle to pay rent, buy groceries, and support Daniel while he's incarcerated for something that should have been handled as a family matter. She shared it on every social media platform she could access, tagged me in posts asking why I wasn't helping my own family, and even had some of their friends message me directly, asking how I could abandon them in their time of need. The GoFundMe raised $127 over 2 weeks before being reported and taken down for containing false information about the legal case, but not before several people who knew the real story commented with corrections. This family stole money from their daughter on her college graduation day to fund a gambling trip. There was nothing false about the accusations. They admitted guilt in court. Lisa worked her way through engineering school while her family mocked her efforts. Then they used her credit card without permission to pay for a casino vacation. She doesn't owe them anything. I know this family. The daughter who's doing well deserves credit for rising above their toxic behavior, not criticism for protecting herself from people who would steal from their own child. But here's the beautiful irony. Every attempt they made to get my help only made them look worse. People could look up the court records online. They could see the local newspaper coverage of the arrests and sentencing. They could read Sandra's own Facebook posts from before the arrest, where she'd bragged about the Atlantic City trip and dismissed my graduation. Every time they tried to play victim, it reminded everyone that they were criminals trying to manipulate their successful family member into bailing them out. Every social media post, every GoFundMe share, every public plea just reinforced the narrative that they were toxic people who'd steal from their own daughter and then blame her for not forgiving them. The last direct contact came almost exactly 1 year after my graduation. I was at a coffee shop near my office reviewing project plans for a new municipal building when Sandra walked in. She looked terrible, thin, tired, wearing clothes that had clearly seen better days. Her hair was graying and unkempt, and she moved with the defeated posture of someone who'd lost everything. She spotted me immediately, probably not hard since I was wearing a nice suit and working on a laptop in a coffee shop that cost more per cup than she was making per hour. She walked straight to my table without hesitation. "Lisa, please, just 5 minutes." I looked up from my laptop. She looked even worse up close. Dark circles under her eyes, hands that shook slightly from stress or medication, the kind of exhaustion that comes from months of financial and emotional pressure. "I don't think we have anything to discuss," I said flatly. "Your brother is getting out next month, and we don't have anywhere for him to stay. We lost the house 6 months ago. Rick and I are living in a 1-bedroom apartment that costs more than half my income from the gas station, and it's not enough, and I don't know what else to do." She was crying now, not loudly, but with tears running down her cheeks. Other customers were starting to notice the disturbance. "You destroyed my graduation day. You stole my money. You committed crimes using my identity, and now you want me to solve your problems? We're your family. We raised you and fed you and put a roof over your head for 18 years. Doesn't that count for something?" The audacity was still there. Even in her desperation, she was trying to claim credit for doing the bare minimum that parents are legally required to do, while ignoring years of emotional neglect and the criminal betrayal that had brought us to this point. "No," I said, closing my laptop and standing up. "Family shows up for each other's graduations. Family doesn't steal money from each other to fund gambling trips. Family doesn't try to destroy someone's financial future to pay for their own entertainment." I walked past her toward the door, then turned back for one final comment. "I hope Daniel finds somewhere to stay when he gets out. I hope you figure out your housing situation. I hope Rick finds steady work. But none of that is my responsibility anymore. You made your choices, and I made mine." I left her standing there in the middle of the coffee shop, looking small and broken. That was the last time I saw her in person. Here is the continuation of the rewritten script with Lisa as the female protagonist. I walked out of that coffee shop and felt something I hadn't felt in years: relief. Not happiness, not pride, just the heavy weight finally sliding off my shoulders. For years, I'd been dragging my family behind me like an anchor. Their neglect, their favoritism, their manipulation. And for the first time, I wasn't carrying it anymore. They were still out there, sinking under the weight of their own choices, but I was finally swimming free. I didn't answer their calls after that. I didn't reply to letters. I didn't acknowledge the social media guilt trips or the occasional mutual acquaintance who tried to play mediator. I had spent 24 years chasing scraps of validation from people who never intended to give me any. I wasn't going to spend a 25th. The weeks turned into months. My new job became my new life. For the first time, I could breathe financially. I upgraded my tiny studio to a real 2-bedroom apartment with actual windows that let in sunlight instead of just the glow of the parking lot street lamp. I bought furniture that wasn't secondhand or duct taped together. Every paycheck felt like freedom. I started traveling a little, nothing extravagant, just short trips with friends from work or old classmates, seeing mountains I'd only read about, walking beaches that didn't have broken glass in the sand, eating meals I didn't have to calculate down to the last dollar. It wasn't about luxury, it was about possibility. At work, my reputation grew. Brennan Engineering put me on projects that mattered: bridges, municipal buildings, infrastructure that would stand for decades. My name started appearing in reports and press releases. My supervisors trusted me. My team respected me. It was the exact opposite of my family. And slowly the bitterness started to fade. Don't get me wrong, I'll never forgive them for what they did. For missing every milestone, for stealing from me, for trying to drag me down just when I was finally climbing out. Forgiveness is a gift, and they never earned it. But the anger, the late-night replaying of old arguments, the endless what-ifs, it started to lose its grip on me. I realized I didn't need their approval. I never did. I had been building a life they couldn't even imagine, and I didn't need them in it. 1 year after graduation, I stood on stage at the State Engineering Conference giving a presentation on sustainable bridge design. As I clicked through my slides, I caught sight of the audience, a sea of professionals, mentors, and students taking notes. People who saw me not as the dramatic daughter or the loner sister, but as an expert, a peer. The applause at the end was louder than I expected. I smiled, thanked them, and walked off stage with my head high. Afterward, one of the senior engineers came up to me. "Lisa, that was outstanding. You've got a real future in this field." And for the first time, I believed it. Back in my apartment that night, I pulled out the framed photo from graduation, the one of me in cap and gown, my neighbor cheering behind me. I looked at that picture and realized something. That was my real family. Not by blood, but by choice. People who showed up, people who cared, people who wanted to see me win. Family isn't just the people you're born to. Sometimes, it's the people who walk into your life when you're struggling with groceries and decide you're worth cheering for. Sandra, Rick, and Daniel, they made their choices. They chose excuses over effort. They chose gambling over love. They chose fraud over family. I chose differently, and that's why my life is different now. A few months later, I got a wedding invitation from Rachel, my old study partner. She wrote a handwritten note on the back. "Lisa, you were like my sister during school. I can't imagine this day without you there." I cried reading it, not because I was sad, but because for the first time, someone actually wanted me there. Not for what I could give them, not because of guilt or obligation, but because I mattered. At the wedding, surrounded by laughter and joy, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: belonging. Daniel was probably still in prison. Sandra and Rick were probably still barely scraping by, still telling themselves stories where they were the victims. Maybe they even still blamed me. But as I danced under string lights with my new friends, I realized it didn't matter anymore. I'd stopped waiting for them to change. I'd stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I'd stopped hoping for the family I never had. Instead, I built my own. And every day since, I've lived by one simple truth. You don't get to choose the family you're born into, but you do get to choose the family you keep. And I chose me.